I have always loved when journalists start their articles detailing the location where they met a notable person for an interview. I like to picture the white tablecloth on the outdoor patio of the fine dining establishment or the bright, modern living room if the interview was done in the luminary's home. So imagine my disappointment when I wanted to start this piece describing my interview setting and all I had to work with was, I sat in my New York City apartment closet, next to the dirty laundry, staring at the computer screen, waiting for the Zoom meeting to start. Such was life during production of this issue, as we all grappled with the hopefully momentary realities of the pandemic. However, these 5 powerhouse women proved the old adage true: it's not about where you are, but who you are with. Through hours of conversation, the women you'll read about on the following pages opened up about all aspects of success. Here, they each share a moment in time on their respective journeys, a story you may not have heard before but one that, as you seek your own version of success, will shed light and truth on what success means and what it takes to get there. Number 1, India. Terry. 4-time Grammy Award-winning R&B legend. Music has always been a part of my life, an ancestral thing for me. Most of my mother's side of the family sang and wrote songs or were preachers or evangelists. In the South, evangelists are synonymous with singing. My mother was a singer. Motown wanted to sign her. In fact, the first original song that I knew was one my mother wrote for me to learn the days of the week when I was a child. I started writing music after graduating high school. I was good at English, I was good at music, so I just took those two things and put them together and started writing my own songs. Then in college, I took my first paycheck from the bookstore where I worked and bought a guitar, which apparently wasn't a good guitar. Someone saw it and gave me a better one, and I wrote more. Then one night, around that time, I had written 3 songs and decided to play them one night at a little spot in Savannah, Georgia. I remember I closed my eyes and sang my song, and when I opened my eyes again, everything had changed. People were standing and clapping. People had come in from outside to listen. All I remember was all these people. It was so dramatic. I went home and told my mother what had happened. Though she loved music, having had her own taste of the industry, she had encouraged me to pursue an education instead. But something changed that day. Not long after that, I'll never forget, I was walking past the kitchen and my mother stopped me and said, "Let me ask you a question." I could tell she was serious. "Do you want to sing in the kitchen? And at church like me and your aunts? Or do you want to really take a chance to be a singer?" I looked at her and said, "I want to take a chance." And she said, "Take it seriously." And so I did, and I have for the past 20 years since. Number 2, Seema Bansal. Co-founder of Venus Et Fleur, a multi-million-dollar flower business. During the entire journey there were so many naysayers, friends in my ear saying this was a bad decision or that no one was going to buy flowers that are packaged. Even my parents. They were trying to be supportive, sure, but they were scared. I was using my life savings to start a business. To move to a different country, Vancouver to New York City. To put everything on the line based only on the belief in myself. The interesting thing was, that's exactly what I'd watched my father do. He immigrated to Canada, risked everything, and eventually started his own company where he put us to work learning everything there was to know about being an entrepreneur. Through his example I learned, I just have to trust my gut. The best thing I ever did was believe in my own dreams, which I know sounds cliché, but it really is the magic tool to help you get where you want to be. You have to trust your journey, you have to keep going. And I think that's the best thing I've ever done. The day I was leaving Vancouver to start a business in New York with my new boyfriend, now husband, I was at the airport with my parents who still weren't happy about it. But, I remember it so clearly, my dad looked at me and said, "You know what? Good luck. Do it. If you have to come back you can come back. But just go for it." And I started to cry. My mom started to cry. He kind of started tearing up. It was really emotional. But I felt like it was the proper send-off. He knew this was what the universe was telling me to do. It felt amazing. I'll never forget that day, leaving my parents. Being on my own with all my suitcases, running through the airport so I didn't miss my flight. Literally chasing a dream that's now come true. Number 3, Susan Cain. Best-selling author of Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking and founder of Quiet Revolution. The first book I ever wrote was called Peggy Meets A. It was 3 pieces of loose-leaf paper stapled together and I was about 4 years old. Then when I was a little older, I started a magazine and I sold subscriptions to my family members. Even at a young age, and beyond the writing itself, there was something about the writer's life that felt like such a strong sense of destiny. But when I was a few years older, my father took me aside and assured me that while it's a nice romantic dream to be a writer, it won't be so romantic when you're grown and can't pay the bills, so I took a 15-year detour and practiced law instead. And I was pretty ambitious about it, pretty engaged in it, and I really liked the firm where I practiced. But I used to live in Greenwich Village in Manhattan across the street from the Barnes & Noble, and I would often go there late at night after work. And one night I found this book called Do What You Are. It was a book that had you take the Myers-Briggs personality test and match your type to your ideal career. All of the careers that are mapped to my type were things like social worker, psychologist, clergy person and writer. Then came the year that I was up for partner at the law firm. They came and told me that I wasn't going to make partner. I remember I was really upset, but I asked for a leave of absence. I left the firm 3 hours later and I never went back. A week later I signed up for a creative nonfiction writing at NYU. I sat in that classroom on the very first night of class and I remember so distinctly where I was sitting, right in the middle of the 12-desk horseshoe arrangement, and thinking, okay, I found my home. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I will never be able to make a living at this, but I'm organizing my whole life around it. And I have. Number 4, Misty Copeland. First African-American principal dancer with the prestigious American Ballet Theater. The first ballet class I ever took was on a basketball court. I was one of 6 kids. My mother was a single parent and we faced a lot of challenges, moving a lot, changing schools. And while this was the only life I knew, I became an extremely introverted child. I learned to keep my mouth closed to avoid criticism from other kids. I never in my whole life felt like I ever fit in. I never felt like I ever belonged anywhere. Those first few ballet classes were no different. The class was free at the local Boys and Girls Club and designed for kids like me, diverse students who maybe didn't have the access or the means to be a part of the ballet world otherwise. I remember walking into the gymnasium, onto the basketball court and immediately feeling out of place. There I was, 13 years old, which is ancient in ballet years, being thrust into this class that was so foreign to me, hearing music that I'd never heard before, and having an instructor manipulate my body to put it into different positions. Not to mention I was the only person in the class who wasn't in a leotard, tights and ballet slippers. I was wearing a t-shirt, shorts and socks. I remember thinking, no, this isn't for me, I don't fit in. I don't belong here. However, a week or 2 later, the instructor offered me a full scholarship to train at her school. My mother allowed me to go and my stepfather took me to the local ballet store, Alva's. I remember putting on the leotard and tights for the first time and they immediately felt like a second skin. They fit. I fit. This is where I belonged. And for the first time in my life, I soared. And then, years later as a soloist at American Ballet Theater in New York City, there was the night of the Firebird Ballet performance, and everything changed for me. I'll never forget that night, a night that almost didn't happen as I was keeping a pretty severe injury under wraps because I knew if the artistic staff and physical therapists had known the severity of my pain, they wouldn't have allowed me to perform. But my shows were sold out at the Metropolitan Opera House and I knew that more than half of the audience would be black and brown people, which had never happened before at the Met. I knew that many of them were coming for the very first time. As a woman who never felt like she belonged, I knew how important it was that I dance that night. I told myself, Even if this is the last night that I ever perform on the stage again, it's going to do something huge for the ballet world, and for my community within the ballet world. I remember coming out onto the stage for the first time and, though all I saw was a sea of darkness, I could feel the energy. The audience was cheering for so long and so loud that I couldn't hear the orchestra. I thought to myself, well, I don't know if I'm on the music or not, but I'm just gonna keep moving and see what happens. The pride, and love, and energy that I felt from the audience was palpable. I've never experienced anything like it since. That was my first and only show of Firebird during that Met season. The next day I told the artistic staff about my injury, was in surgery sometime later, and it took several months for me to recover and return to the stage. But it was more than worth it. The Firebird performance was the night I realized, this is not even me up here. This is me representing all of the incredible black women who didn't get a chance to do what I did. The black women, in all fields, who paved the way for me to have an opportunity to stand on that stage. I know now my purpose goes beyond ballet, that this child who once kept her mouth closed, can now be the voice to represent so many who may feel like they don't belong. Number 5, Jen Hatmaker. Speaker, podcast host of For the Love with Jen Hatmaker and author of Fierce, Free, and Full of Fire, The Guide to Being Glorious You. Before I was an author, I was a teacher. And then I took a break from teaching and I had a whole bunch of babies in a row. 1, 2, 3, I have 5 children now, and for a while I was having them every other year. Then, right about the time my third kid was about to turn 2 and, according to our spawning cycle, unofficially meant it was baby time, I had an idea. I remember I was in the car with my husband, he was driving, we were going somewhere. And it was that safe space, you know, because he was driving and couldn't look at me, when I said the thing I was about to say. I told him, it's time to birth something. I think this summer, instead of having another baby, I'm going to write a book. And he was like, well, that's an interesting thing to say. Interesting was a nice way of putting it. I'd never written a book. Nobody was asking me to write a book. I didn't even own a laptop. We were struggling financially. We had all these babies, and we were barely making it month to month, and I'm pretty sure my husband thought, since we weren't having another baby, I could go back to the classroom and relieve some of the financial pressure. So for me to say that I'm not going back to work and I'm going to write a book, God bless him for not driving into a tree. Not only that, he went home and bought me a $200 laptop off Craigslist, plugged that sucker into our dial-up internet and told me, I'll figure out a way to work from home 1 day a week so you can have time to write. He really believed in my dream, and he put wind behind it. And here we are, 12 books later. Thanks for watching. If you like the video and our hard work in making of this video, please like the video and subscribe the channel for daily motivational and inspirational videos.